So, good morning, everybody. I'm Marie Jenkins, and this is our episode of The Secret Diary of Marie Jenkins 47 Plus. And it's for our May Housing Week. Now, we're very privileged to have Alistair with us this morning. Good morning, Alistair.
Morning, Marie. How are you?
I'm fantastic, thank you. I'm really looking forward to learning more about yourself and also HQN. So that's a really nice pivotal point to say. Over to you. What is it you do? And tell us a bit more about you.
Yeah, I'm Alistair Macintosh, Chief Executive of the Housing Quality Network, currently incarcerated in a library in a hut in North London like everyone else in the blinking population.
I love the fact that yours is actually a real bookcase rather than a virtual.
I've actually just broken into Holloway Library. I hope it's something council don't catch me.
Many a book on the shelf there. Are they all housing related, or have you got a particular genre you enjoy reading?
Generally, whatever's cheapest in the bookshop.
It's good to have a vast knowledge in different topics. So yeah, fantastic.
If you're looking for a vast knowledge, you've come to the wrong guy.
Well, I know that you're an expert on a lot of things housing because I've been watching your weekly First Things First videos on YouTube.
You know, Marie, for the last 30 weeks, we've been trying to find out who the viewer was. So we're pleased to see you.
Well, I know there's a number of other housing professionals that really get value in it, and I particularly enjoyed the financial statement video that was done by one of your colleagues as well.
Yes, so, Mr. Parker, he's our star.
Yeah. So as well as your twist on them, there's some real informative.
That's right. Yes, I'm just I'm this sort of Ernie Wise to Ian Parker's Morecambe, it would appear.
Very good. So tell me a bit more about your career, because you're the CEO of HQN, but what led you to working in housing?
Yeah, well, goodness. I was doing a course in Edinburgh at the time. I was sent on placement to a housing action centre underneath the Westway in London, very close to where Grenfell is. And I very much got the bug for housing advice. It was a time when there was almost no jobs in Scotland. So thank you, Mrs. Thatcher, for your excellent travel agency. I applied for a number of jobs in London and fortuitously got started at Camden Housing Aid Centre. I had to grow a beard to get that job because when I shaved the beard off, I looked like a child in those days. So that was tricky. I then helped to set up private leasing for Camden, went to work for Coopers and Lybrand, and we did compulsory competitive tendering, stock transfer, then went out on my own with Housing Quality Network. Late 90s, Labour government comes in, keen to improve the standards of housing, introduced inspection. We did the first independent inspection in Liverpool, a bit like the recent Max Collar report in Liverpool, but somewhat less dramatic, and it went from there. So here we are, still in the business, still trying to support landlords, meet whatever regulatory standards are out there, and encouraging them to listen to the resident voice, as we always have done.
Yeah, and I picked that up actually on one of your videos on YouTube about your 5 tips for inspections. And there's a theme there that when I worked in social housing and we was inspected, and we worked with HQN actually. Right. So you massively helped us improve our standards. But the one top tip that I really liked that you gave was about doing your own inspections first.
Yes, I mean, in general, in any regulatory regime, if you identify your problems and fess up, any repercussions from the regulator are vastly reduced. So, self-awareness is the key in housing, as in every other sector.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have them fixed, but an awareness and moving towards improvement is the key, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, the last thing you want is for ITV the ombudsman or the regulator to tell you about something you ought to have known.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I was reading an article by one of the leading solicitors that makes claims on behalf of tenants against the big housing associations. And they make hay because the big housing associations and some smaller ones have got such dreadful internal communications. They never hear from the residents, they never hear from the front line. Chap, 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 along comes the solicitor, out goes the check. All could have been avoided if they simply networked internally, as opposed to, you know, not doing anything at all.
Yeah, yeah, I completely get that. I completely get that. So we've hopefully on the way out of this pandemic now, and obviously a lot of people within housing associations have been working remotely and successfully as well, I'd like to say, because in our April's Housing Week, we had Nick Aitken from Yorkshire Housing, and they've done absolute phenomenal work with reviewing their processes for how their staff can work and thrive. So what do you believe to be the biggest opportunities for the housing sector post-COVID?
Well, I think the challenge is undoubtedly the almost inevitable return of some type of austerity. We've got the biggest national debt since Napoleonic times. And of course, every month when you look at your wage slip, you are reminded of Napoleon, because income tax was invented as a temporary measure to defeat Napoleon. It is still there. So there's bound to be serious repercussions. What that means for housing, we don't know. The opportunity for housing is interest rates are at historic lows also. So there is the chance, if we present ourselves properly, if we keep our reputation intact, of getting money diverted to us, as opposed to other sectors to prime the economy. The difficulty is too many housing organisations are useless at spending cheap money. Lots of organisations put out those bonds, they got money in very cheaply, built blocks that have absolutely trashed their reputation, shared owners, cladding, etc., etc. Yeah. So it's not just investment, it's how we invest it. And then taking the motif of today, will there be a super league in housing? You know, the number of associations have been chopped in half since the coalition came in. We started out with 400 or so thousand plus associations. We're now down to 210 in the latest global accounts. Where will that trend go? Some of the big associations are very good at listening to the residents' voice, others less so. So that battle between getting big enough to dominate, be Amazon, get ahead of the regulator, versus listening to the resident voice, will, I think, be one of the big, big challenges over the next couple of years. The existential challenge is we don't do anything. If you look at the last set of global accounts, predating COVID and all the rest of it, we only added just over 1% to the affordable stock. So the challenge for the sector is we're not spending enough on repairing the existing stock, and we're not building enough new homes to justify our existence in the eyes of, this was the fundamental challenge the Policy Exchange made a few years ago. Housing associations and councils don't build enough homes. What is the point of them? So across all the platforms, across all the points, we do have some significant challenges.
Yeah, definitely. And how can HQN then support housing sectors in that regard, in what you've just mentioned, but also in other areas of what you do?
Well, what we focus on, to be honest, are the basics. So we've got a network on safety, headed by Vicky Cutler, that encourages people to adopt best practice on safety. Ian Parker's network, you've mentioned Ian, he deals with finance, so he's busily working away on stress testing to make sure that business plans are resilient. Lack of adequate stress testing was identified by an independent survey into in-depth assessments as one of the weak points. So we're working on that. We've got an asset management network that, again, is making sure we're good, putting money into the right areas. A strategic network that looks at homelessness and new build. So we're trying to cover all the bases in terms of solid, practical advice and encouraging professionals to talk to each other. Our rent income network's going very well at the moment because, as you will have observed, because we've changed the approach to income collection, because we're supporting residents rather than evicting them, the damage to income collection has been much less severe than anyone ever anticipated. So, it's not down to us by any stretch of the imagination, but our members are working ever so hard to deliver the basics at the moment, and our job is simply to support them.
Yeah. Yeah, when I worked in housing, and we had we developed, actually, while I was there, our new financial inclusion team, which was very much about supporting tenants and being proactive in helping them with their budgeting, especially in light of the housing benefit changes and things that was going on at that time. So I think your networks at HQN could be really valuable, but they cover a number of different areas, don't they? Are they like networking events, or how do they run?
Well, previously, like everyone else, they operated on physically going places, yeah?
Yeah.
Oddly enough, we've done a lot more networking since we went virtual. And I think the sharing of good practice has got an awful lot better, an awful lot more rigorous. It's speeded up a lot through working virtually. And of course, people at Nick Atkin have been pioneers of this for decades. And I think to that extent, it's definitely worked. What we mustn't lose sight of, though, is services on the ground. We've been doing a couple of pilot inspections to get some learning before the new inspection regime is introduced by the regulator. Some great work being done by housing associations, councils and ALMOs virtually, some great customer care, some great customer support. But every now and again, when you go out on the estates, you're struck by the fact that caretakers and staff are working hard to keep the estates clean, but the level of investment required is colossal. And time and again, we're coming across a big gap between the amount of money that needs to be spent on the homes according to stock condition surveys and the amount of money the landlord actually has in the pot. So I think that's a huge challenge. You'll remember from inspection the last time, inspection was used as a carrot, not just a stick. If a local authority and an ALMO passed certain tests, if quality was good enough, but talking to the residents, that triggered the release of money. And I think we probably need another mechanism like that. The disappointment in the charter is it's chock-a-block full of stick, silent and carrot.
I agree. Have you got any sort of recommendations about how people can improve their resident involvement? Because we did a number of different things, with like mystery shopping, trying to encourage board engagement with our residents. So have you got any sort of suggestions around that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the biggest point is don't go looking for a worldie. There is no grand strategic solution. All you're trying to do is win over trust. I spoke to Shauna and Delhi, who work for two major London associations recently. The video is on our YouTube channel. Keith Edwards did some work with Kensington when they were trying to get back trust. And essentially, it's about lots and lots of little examples of proving to residents that you're listening to them and changing things. Bev, who's a resident representative in Merthyr Tydfil on the Housing Association Mutual, she said, what landlords have got to do is listen, hear and act. And it sounds simple, but that is the challenge. Lots and lots of proving that you're listening and acting. And then you mentioned mystery shopping. You don't need to do that anymore, because you can walk into any landlord in the country and get the tape or the recording of frontline service contacts. Yeah. You don't have to phone up pretending someone else anymore. It's all there. Much of it is great. And the really fascinating thing for me is whenever there's a cock-up or a disaster at a local authority or association, you then start going through the rigmarole of finding out what went wrong. Always the frontline view.
Yeah.
So I think for boards and councils, the challenge is to make sure there's a clear conduit, a clear passage of information from the front line to the top brass. If that happens, you will identify problems long before any consultant or regulator ever does.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what you said about trust as well is really important. So, for example, we had Chris Lunt from VoiceScape.
Yes, I know Chris.
On recently. And they're doing incredible stuff with their technology platform to better engage with residents. I think if you're more consistent and that they feel like their voice is being heard, so I think, you know, use of technologies in that respect can also help.
I mean, Max, one of my colleagues, is running a series of online consultations with MRI, and some of the results of that are very interesting. I mean, residents can tell if you're pulling a fast one and downplaying consultation, yeah? And they can also spot the chancers, the ones that go with the flow.
Yeah.
So, you know, run up to 2010, we're all for the residents. Austerity comes in, purge the residents and the councils off the board. Grenfell and the Charter come along. Hello, residents and councillors, where have you been? Yeah, I think the truth will catch the chancellors out very quickly.
Yeah, I agree. Very interesting. So, can you recall a time when you've been working within the sector that's been the most rewarding for you?
Oh, but easily. It was early in my career. I was put in charge of trying to sort out private sector leasing in Camden, yeah? We had over 1,000 families living in bed and breakfast, dreadful accommodation. And I think one of the councils in Wiltshire invented this wrinkle called private sector leasing, where you could repurpose the subsidy system to take properties in the private rented sector for 3 or 4 years, whatever it was. And you were so incentivized by the subsidy system, it hardly cost you anything, yeah? So Camden being Camden, I was sent out on my bike to Hampstead, Highgate, the West End to take properties fit for the richest people in the world, and we put residents into them. So honestly, God, I go past 3, 4, 5 million, 10 million pound properties in those areas today, and I've been in them because I put some of our homeless families into them. It didn't always go smoothly. In those days, Channel 4 was based in Scala Street in Fitzrovia. They were on the ground floor. We leased the tower block above it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, one of the residents left the tap running. Channel 4 News was knocked out for the night, and I occasionally visit a public house, well, daily I visit this public house before lockdown, where Jon Snow also went, and I'm sure he looks at me and he spots the guy that knocked his news out for the night. So I have to duck as I pick my lemonade shandy past him. So that was fantastic. I was sticking it to the man. I was getting folk into quality accommodation, all courtesy of Mrs. Thatcher and her wonderful subsidy system. I will hear no wrong of her.
It's amazing, isn't it? It just shows the real life to things, doesn't it? What, out of interest, so what was your career before you moved to London, when you was in Scotland?
There wasn't one, I was just a puppy. I used to move things around warehouses and work in a lemonade factory and deliver beer on a Saturday without pilfering too much of it.
Well, we all have to start somewhere, Alistair. We all have to start somewhere.
Yes. And mine was in the damp basements of Glaswegian public houses.
Very good. So, can you sort of share with me somebody that you've worked with who you believe inspired you, either on your career path now or?
Oh, there's no question. It's Mildred Levison. She ran the House and Aid Centre in Camden when I first went there in 1983. I looked so young when I shaved the beard of folk kidded on that Mildred had appointed her son or grandson to do the job. But she was a private tenant in Lissenden Mansions, just backing into Hampstead Heath. Rapacious private landlord, she campaigned with others to get that estate taken over by the London Borough of Camden. She succeeded in doing that. That must be Camden's prize asset. Beautiful mansion block flats, overlooking the Heath, tennis courts, everything. She brought that into Camden. You know, Frank Dobson loved her. She did a great job. She went on to a fantastic career at senior levels in housing in London. She retired at a relatively young age by modern standards, and we tried to bring her back for consultancy, and she said, no, Alistair, happy to advise you, but I must make way for young people. So she was class all the way through her career, big impact, big inspiration. Doesn't get spoken about enough because, you know, she wasn't on social media, she wasn't making a big noise for herself. She got on with the job and went home and looked after her family. So she would be the one.
Oh, how lovely. That's a really lovely story, Alistair. So how, because you're based in London at the moment, aren't you, at HQN? And
well, we've got an office in York, and obviously the sooner the House of Lords move up there, the better. So, you know, but in the unlikely event Boris is listening to this, can you please get on with it, move up to York and show us what you're made of, sir? So yeah, we're based in York. We got a nice building there. Interestingly, some of the staff want to move back to it. So I think Nick Atkin needs to get around there and put a picket line up to defend his approach to new technology. But they are desperately knocking into the office at the moment. We're based all over the country. So I am on a hot in Tufnell Park at the moment in London's glamorous Upper Holloway. Others are dotted all over the country. Ian, you mentioned, is in Manchester. Vicky is in rural Scotland. So we're all over the place. So hoping against hope that Zoom and other virtual media continue to work well.
Yeah. So in the future for HQN, are you looking to continue with the hybrid model of sort of offering virtual and face-to-face? What's your view on the future of HQN?
On that narrow question, I think we'll do what people want. The one thing that does strike me, though, is the colossal costs of travel within this country. You know, say you wanted to go to that CIH conference in Manchester, 170 quid return second class, i.e. standing like this, plus the hotels. You want to go to Wales to see the Mutual and Merthyr, that's 250 quid return from Paddington. Very hard to get cheap tickets in Wales. Internal travel costs in London are very expensive. TransPennine in the north is just an absolute flipping nightmare. So I think, I mean, I get Nick's point about the wonders of new technology, but a significant driver is the awful nature of the railways, isn't it?
Well, I picked up that in your episode 24 on your first Think Things First
yes.
On YouTube, and it did make me chuckle, but you do make some really valid points there. But
yes, and down your way where John Land lives, I think that the train station in Ledbury is a hut, isn't it? I woe betide you if you turn up with an internet ticket, because that fella wants to issue good old-fashioned paper tickets. It's a miracle they've gone decimal.
Thankfully, a lot more of us have got bikes now, so...
Yes. It's a short hop up to Glasgow, isn't it?
Well, if you start today, you might get there in week or so? Maybe.
Yeah. Via the hospital for a heart attack at my age.
Hopefully not. Well, Alistair, it's been an absolute delight to speak to you today. If people want to reach out to either yourself or find out more about HQN, how can they do that?
It just punches into the Google machine, and there we are. We've got a website that's got lots of stuff on it, and even I can't navigate it half a blinking time. But we're not hard to find, yeah.
Okay, so and if they go on the YouTube that we've mentioned this morning, if they look at what do they put into the Google search, into the YouTube, is that HQN as well?
Yeah. You know, cantankerous old jock, and you'll get me, yeah.
Well, I'm hoping it will give people a few chuckles as well as being informative, because I do enjoy watching your videos, Alistair, and I do hope they continue. So it's been an absolute pleasure.
Great stuff. Well, lovely to meet you, and I wish you well in the future.
Thanks, Alistair. Bye.